Okay, so where we left our state of our form was we had done some validation, at least with the number. We saw how to convert a string into an integer. So now let's do some more. But in that process, I thought, you know what? I also want to go back to the carbon footprint and grab some of the content because it just makes it easier. And in the process, I'm going to clean up the code a little bit. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is on my index, right? I'm going to change that to what they had. That's great, right? And then how many people in the household? Theirs was count. I like that. Count, right? Just to make it consistent, right? Count and then size. Right, those are the only two I've done. Somebody was asking me if we're going to do the rest, and I think I'm going to start building that into some of the weekly challenges. We'll see. All right, so now we have those, which is great. I'm not sure. Oh, I must have grabbed an extra. Oh, I could have just had my prettier fix that. Okay, so that's one thing on the index. And now on the main, I want to get rid of some stuff we no longer need. So I'm going to get rid of that. Right, I'm going to get rid of some of this. So any place right now we have comments, get rid of those for now, just so we have that. Right. And then let's think about here, generally, because matter of fact, I think one of the things I'm going to have you do is go through and document, write some comments for what each of these functions is doing in our code. But I think I'm going to do that in the discussion this week. Okay, so let's look at our output. We didn't change anything in our output except some of the content, which I think is hopefully a good change, right? But let's think about this, right? Because now one of the things here is that we know, based on our code, right, based on our logic, that the valid input would be between 1, right, and anything, right, 6 greater than 6. So we could write validation code for that and it would be fine. But again, learning how to have the HTML validate it for you is a really good idea, right? And so there's something, and let's just move back over to the editor. And now in the index, under the number of household, there is something called minimum. Okay, now you have to put this in quotes. Okay, max equals the max amount they can have. Okay, and we still have required. So just by putting this in the output, we get some built-in validation, which is totally fun. Okay, so let's just see that in action first. Okay, so let's make sure I have the current copy here. Okay, okay, so if I put in 7, right, and then I put in small, it flags it. It says value must be less than or greater to 6. So just adding that gave us that ability. Now we can also add some fun CSS to actually take advantage of this as well. So I decided to go over to chat and ask it because I couldn't quite remember the CSS I needed for this. Okay, so my prompt in this case was give me a code example of minimum input, minimum, maximum values, and out of range. So what this is, and in this case we're going to code this right here. So it's what we call a pseudo code, but it basically says it's going to look at the input, and if it's in range because it's checking that min and max, it's going to change the background color, okay, to a light green. So in this case, I'm just going to grab that one, okay, and where would I put it? And I think it's almost time for us to have an external style sheet, okay. Now let's clean up on aisle 6 because we can. Okay, so that will first give us, and let's just look at that one. Okay, so just by putting that in there, we get green, which is awesome. Right, so it's just basically saying right now, because there's no value in there, right, it's just giving the user a visual hint. And by adding the other one, here it is, right, So, and actually it wouldn't hurt us to put the comment in there as well, but for now I'm just going to say now it's going to look at the input, right? And again, this is only because we use the min and max that this works. So we're going to copy that, right? And actually I think if I go here, oh, it still didn't do it. I'm just going to manually do it this time. Okay, so now it says if it's out of range, then it colors it a different color. In this case, these are, you can either click here and select a specific color. Matter of fact, yeah, I would recommend you do that. These are actual words that represent these colors, so sometimes they're just a little easier to use. So what does that give us? Now, if we hit 8, it turns the color of the input field, which is totally awesome and totally fun to be able to do. Okay, so that's the first thing. We can do that. Again, what we're basically doing is learning some HTML to not have to write as much JavaScript. And you might think, well, we're trying to learn how to write JavaScript, but you really don't want to write JavaScript for something you can handle in the HTML. And you could talk about if this is bulletproof or not. But okay, so now let's go back here. And now let's think about, this, right? Because why would we want to, and how have you seen, and you have seen places do this, right? Because our websites, forms do this to where what they do is they give you a drop down. Because if you ask a user, right, you almost guaranteed somebody's going to do this or somebody's going to do this, right? So we can make this really pretty easy by using the select. Okay, so where we would have an input, right, we would have the user select from a drop down because it's just so much better for validation. So let's do that. Okay, we already have a label, so we need a select. Okay, so first we have a beginning and ending select. Okay, so let's do that first. So we come up here, right, so what we're doing is refactoring this line. Okay, so we'll start with just a select. Okay, now the name we want to keep the same. It just makes our life easier. Okay, and now this you could also for a minute, because I don't think this yeah, so I use the command / here just to comment that out really quickly. So now what you want to do here, and we do not need an ID for this. It just, your editor is putting that in there, your IDE VS Code, right? So now we're going to say option value. So what this does right here is that it gives you, this is what the user sees, as you can clearly see here. So, and the value is what we're going to end up grabbing to use in our code. Okay, so let's do that. So now inside of here we're going to do option, right? We're going to leave that as blank. We're going to do that same thing as please enter size of home, right? And then 1, 2, 3, good. So in this case, now we're going to, and we could go look at it. We could look at this, right? Cool, that looks good. So now we just have to enter option tab. Okay, so we could do large, or we could start however you wanted, right? We could do apartment maybe at the beginning, I don't know. Now in this case, right, or we could abbreviate it, right? So that's the first one. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to do this one. So the next one would be, and this is the value we want to make sure, because this is what we're going to have our JavaScript code find or point to, is that one. So I could say large apartment or large. Maybe it makes sense to put large first. I don't know. We'll look at it and see what it looks like. Okay, and we'll do small. Remember, what the user sees is between the options, right? Oh, actually, we should have put medium, so let's do that. Right, so let's put medium here. And then we'll put I think it's only 4 options that we have, right? Okay. And this can be, right. Okay, so let's go look at it real quick. So you can, oh, that looks nice. That looks awesome. Okay, so now before we try it, let's look at our code and see if there's anything we would need to change for this. Will this line still grab our house size, right? Will it grab the house size? We could test it, right, by walking through the code, but we could also just try it. So I'm just going to put in this. I'm going to put in 4, and I'm going to put in apartment. All right, actually, I'm going to do large, okay? I'm going to come down here. I'm going to say, wow, look at that. It actually worked. Are you surprised it actually worked? Right? It's pretty cool that it actually worked, in my opinion, right? So it did do the right thing. Let's try another one. Okay, and let's actually, again, 7, right? And even if we did this, oh, okay, we know that won't work. Okay, so let's do 4. And right, what will happen if we don't give it 1? Oh, there's a problem, right? What's the problem here? Is that this allows us to submit even if we haven't. So what we'd want to do is come back over to select and read through and realize that you can also still use required here. So now on our index, all we'd have to do is add required. Okay? By doing that step now, okay, and then we put here, now we get that nice little validation. Okay, so there we go. Now apartment. Oh, now interesting. Apartment size 0. Okay, so here's your code challenge for this one. Is the way, and it may be, is apartment working? And if not, why not? Okay, so pause right here, right? Does, and we'll put here, does the apartment code or score, is the apartment, let's say it that way, is the apartment score correct? And if not, why not? Why not? Okay, so check out the code. So look at it for a minute, see if you can figure that out. Now you may have already coded it correctly because you saw it when it happened. If not, take a look at the code and see if you can troubleshoot what happened. Okay? All right, pause here. Give me your answer before you move on. So what happened here is when we, again, this code correctly referenced the house size, okay? And on the index, I actually typed out apartment, but on the JavaScript, okay, I was looking for APT. So what I could do is leave this in place or change it, or I could come over here, instead of apartment, I could just put APT. So whatever is a value here, because the JavaScript is grabbing it, is the important part to understand that when, and I'm going to show you this because that's how important this is. Let's actually go right to line here, right? So, okay. So when you hit submit here, you've already gone over the line that on line 71 for me, sorry, line 72, where it is pointing to, so again, form dot house, right? Remember house as was in the index, the name I gave it. That's how it points to it. So it says, okay, look in the DOM, look at what is named in here, and then grab the value, right? So if I just did that, it would give me the select. But in this case, because I've given each of these a value, then all I have to do is say dot value. So it works like everything else we've seen, except in this case we're not using an input, we're using a select, which is really more commonly called a drop-down menu. And now why are we doing this? Why are we doing all of this? Is to make sure we're getting good data from the user, because right? Why? I want you to write this. I've been saying it, right? But why? Why are we doing all this work in the form to make sure the user gives us good data? Why? Okay, you don't have to type the question, but I want to know your answer because I've said it. Hopefully you know it without me saying it. And the answer is the users. You have to assume the users are not going to give you good data. Like I'm not giving good data here, but that's just because I'm running it a lot, right? So what we're really working on is using HTML to save us from writing a lot of JavaScript because it's already built in. So it's very efficient, right? It's easy to use. So it's really prime for what we're doing. Okay, so in this case, let's come back here. Let me see what I had for this one. Oh yeah, so I'll write up a, there'll be the video here, and then I'll give you a commit message. Actually, I think this is it, using HTML to validate, because this was the one, yeah, rendering to the DOM. And then it's time for me to figure out what we're going to do for the discussion this week. All right, talk to you later.